Good afternoon or good morning, wherever you find yourself in God's good world. We're so thankful to have you here with us. I am the Reverend Sekinah Hamlin. I am the Economic Justice Minister for the United Church of Christ in our national setting. I'm so thankful to also be joined by my colleague, Andrea Burse, who is behind the scenes working her magic. We welcome you to this important webinar so that we can provide space for you to get your student loan debt cancellation questions answered. The United Church of Christ has been an active part of pushing for student loan debt cancellation. For us, it is a racial justice issue. And while we are thankful for $10,000 in student loan debt cancellation, our goal was no less than $50,000. Why is that? Because it is a racial justice issue. And we know that of that more than $1.6 trillion in student loan debt, the highest amount on average is held by Black women. Following Black women are Pacific Islanders. Following Pacific Islanders are those Native American, indigenous folks. And white women are then behind that. So it is a racial justice issue. And it is one that studies have shown that unless you actually forgive $50,000 worth of student loan debt, you don't even tackle or make one move, one iota, as the old folks would say, in that racial wealth gap. So that means we're going to keep pushing. But while we continue to push with our advocacy piece, we want to make sure that you have all the information that you need so that you can take advantage of those things that are occurring right now. And we wanted to be sure that we brought together a wonderful group of professionals, all of whom are senior officials in their organizations. The first that you'll hear from is Attorney Ashley Harrington, who is the senior advisor in the Office of Federal Student Aid at the U.S. Department of Education. Then you'll hear from Scott Filter, who is a senior officer and advisor in the Office of Students and Young Consumers, in the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And then last, you'll hear from our good friend, Attorney Catherine Welbeck, who is the Civil Rights Counsel and also the Director of Advocacy at the Student Borrower Protection Center. Our colleagues will come in that order and make sure those that are with us live, if you have any additional questions, that you put those in the Q&A box. Attorney Harrington, thank you for being with us.
No problem. Thanks so much, Sekinah. Thank you for having me. Thank you to you and your team for putting this together. I think I probably have about 15 to 20 minutes, and I think I have way more slides than 15 to 20 minutes. Not way more, because I don't want y'all to freak out. But I have enough to give y'all the information that I hope will be helpful, followed by great information from Scott and Kat. So I'm gonna go ahead and jump in and share my screen. It's a privilege to be here. And we will jump right in so we make sure we have time at the end for questions. Okay. All right. So I'm here today to primarily talk about public service loan forgiveness, but absolutely, we know we're going to talk about one-time debt relief as well. But I want to start with PSLF because we have this time limited waiver. And the changes that we're going to talk about today for public service loan forgiveness are part of the Biden-Harris administration's efforts at providing targeted student loan relief. Even before the one-time debt relief initiative that we announced in August, we had already approved more student loan debt cancellation than any administration ever. And so it's a privilege to be a part of this administration that is prioritizing student loan borrowers. And to date, we've approved nearly $36 billion in debt cancellation for almost 1.7 million borrowers. That number is growing all the time. And that's includes nearly $13 billion for over 211,000 public servants through improvements to public service loan forgiveness that we're going to talk about today. Remember that $36 billion does not include the one-time debt relief we announced that we're going to talk about shortly. So let's start with the limited PSLF waiver. I'm going to go through everything fairly quickly, so you may see me skip over some slides. I promise you I'm not doing you a disservice. I just want to make sure we have time at the end for questions, and we will share the entire slide deck after the presentation. So again, we've approved nearly $13 billion in debt cancellation for more than 211,000 borrowers, but the limited PSLF waiver is not just for people who have gotten forgiveness. Another million plus borrowers have gotten closer to forgiveness. The average borrowers picked up a year's worth of additional credit towards the 120 required for PSLF. So that's 12 fewer months they have to be living under the burden of student debt. So I want to talk about the basics of PSLF to start, because it's always helpful to start there. So when we talk about the waiver, we know what we are actually waiving. So public service loan forgiveness was created by Congress in October of 2007, and it forgives the remaining payments on federal direct student loans after a borrower has made 120 qualifying monthly payments while working for a qualifying employer. So you can see this flow chart here that really lays that out. 120 qualifying payments on federal direct loans while you're working for a qualifying employer. Under normal rules, to get forgiveness, you have to be working for a qualifying employer when you apply for and get PSLF forgiveness. And at the end, whatever's left over is forgiven and it's not taxable income. So you heard me say qualifying quite a few times, I hope. And we're going to dig into each of those pieces separately, because we like to say you had to have the right loan with the right repayment with the right job. So let's start with the right loan. The right loan is direct loans. That includes consolidation loans, and it does include Parent Plus loans, but we are going to talk about Parent Plus loans a little bit more extensively in a second. It doesn't include FFEL program loans. That's Federal Family Education Program loans. These are loans that were originated by private lenders like Sallie Mae or Wells Fargo, but guaranteed by the federal government. Also doesn't include Perkins loans. These were loans that were originated by institutions of higher education and guaranteed by the federal government, and didn't include any other federal or private student loan. Again, we're talking about normal PSLF rules, so some of this may sound very familiar to you. And you could always consolidate, right? You could consolidate a FFEL loan or a Perkins loans into a direct consolidation loan But when you did that, you started at zero. Even if you had a direct loan and you consolidated it for whatever reason, under normal rules, you started at zero. And it's so interesting that this was the case, right? Because when this was created, when PSLF was created back in October of 2007, there were way more FFEL borrowers than direct borrowers. And yet these folks could not automatically get access to PSLF. They had to consolidate to do so. So that's the right loan. Let's talk about the right repayment. To count towards that 120, it had to be on time, had to be made on a standard plan or an income-driven repayment plan. It had to be for at least the amount due, and it can be non-consecutive. We do get a lot of questions from folks about, what if I took time off, or I went to the private sector, or I went back to school? What does that mean? And your journey is your journey. You don't have to get to 120 in a directly straight line. For some folks, they're going to get their 120 in exactly 10 years. For other folks, it can take them 15 years or 20 years. That's okay. It doesn't have to be consecutive. The payment cannot be more than 15 days late. It can't be made on a graduated, extended, or alternative plan. Can't be for less than the amount due, and it can't be made when not required. So if you're in school and your loans are deferred, or you're in that grace period following when you leave school and you make a payment, those payments wouldn't count because you're not required. So a quick note on Parent Plus loans, because I did note that they are eligible for PSLF if you have direct Parent Plus loans. They're not excluded. The thing about Parent Plus loans is they're not eligible for income-driven repayment for all income-driven repayment plans. In order for a Parent Plus borrower to get an income-driven repayment plan, they have to consolidate. And then once they have a direct consolidation loan with an underlying Parent Plus loan, they can access one of the IDR plans. It's called ICR, Income Contingent Repayment. And it is an income-based plan, but it is usually the least generous of the plans. And so we do encourage our Parent Plus borrowers to use a loan simulator and game out what their ICR payment will be and whether that makes sense for them in the long term or in the short term versus what they could be paying on a graduated or extended payment plan. So that's the right loan and the right repayment. Let's talk about the right job. For us, we define it as full-time, which we define as 30 hours a week or the equivalent. And it's about the employer. So it has to be government, that's federal, state, local, or tribal, and it does include military. It includes all 501c3 nonprofits, and includes some other nonprofits if they provide a qualifying public service. So that's things like emergency management, public health, early childhood education, things like that. It doesn't include part-time work that does not add up to full-time. Doesn't include volunteer work. So if you're not getting paid, it doesn't count. Doesn't include any for-profit entities, doesn't include labor unions, and it doesn't include partisan political organizations. So we like to say it's about the employer. It's not about the job. We're not going to ask you what you do for that agency or for that nonprofit. We don't care what your title is or how much you make. We just want to know who pays you, who's on your W-2, who's on your pay stub, and is it a federal, state, local, or tribal government entity, including a public school or a military branch? Or is it a 501c3 nonprofit? Or is it another nonprofit that provides one of those qualifying public services? And if it is, it counts. You can even have multiple part-time jobs and have it add up to full-time. So if I work 15 hours a week at a state government, another 15 hours a week at a 501c3 nonprofit, I work 30 hours a week in public service and I'm full-time and I can get credit for those months. And also please note that you can get credit for time spent on religious activities and for while working for churches or other religious nonprofits, those organizations can count now. And normally under normal rules, you have to be employed at an eligible employer when you actually get the forgiveness. Again, we're talking about normal PSLF. There's also something called temporary expanded public service loan forgiveness. This was also created by Congress through appropriations, and it was just for borrowers who couldn't get their loans forgiven because they had made some payments on the wrong plan. And so for borrowers who had made payments on the extended or graduated plan, it enabled them to get forgiveness. So this is separate from the limited waiver that we haven't even started talking about yet. We're going to get to soon. Don't confuse the limited waiver with TEPSLF. So just a quick note, because one thing that we announced in August is also that we had extended this COVID-19 payment pause through the end of December for those of us who have had our loans on pause due to COVID since March of 2020. We extended that through the end of December to give folks more time to transition back into repayment smoothly and to make sure they're able to get on track and stay on track with their payments. Just want to flag you can get credit for every single one of these months towards PSLF. So if you were able to maintain public service employment for any of all of these months, you can get credit for those months towards PSLF. So if you've maintained PSLF eligible employment for the entire period, that's 30 plus months towards your 120, even though we have not had to make a payment. And that's more than a fourth of the way towards the 120 required for forgiveness. You still have to certify that employment, but you can get credit for every single one of these months, even though we haven't been required to make a payment. So that's how normal PSLF works. Now we're going to talk about this really exciting stuff called the limited PSLF waiver. Prior to the waiver, only 7,000 borrowers had gotten forgiveness through PSLF. And now in less than a year, we are at 211. Actually, maybe it's a little bit more than a year now because it was October 6th. Sorry, a little bit over a year. We are at 211,000 borrowers with forgiveness through PSLF and another million plus closer to forgiveness. So this is huge. This is really, really exciting. The average forgiveness is 50,000 or 60,000. People are getting $100,000 or $200,000 in loans forgiven. So this is a big deal. And so basically, these are these time limited changes that allows borrowers to get credit for past periods of repayment that normally don't qualify for PSLF. So under these new time limited changes, you can get credit for any prior period of repayment, regardless of the payment plan, regardless of the loan program, regardless of whether you made a payment in full, made it on time, none of that matters. So basically what I'm asking you to do is, like all the stuff we talked about for the last few slides, put 90% of it in a box because right now it doesn't matter. We don't care what repayment plan you were on. We don't care what type of loan you have. We don't care if you missed a payment. You could have even been in some periods of deferment and forbearance and we'll give you credit. We just want to know if you were in something we call active repayment status, and we define that very generously. As long as you weren't in school, as long as you weren't in that grace period, as long as you weren't in default, you can get credit for a lot of that time. You still need qualifying employment. We didn't change anything about that, but this is huge. That's how you get from 7,000 to 211,000 is if you waive these rules and you give people credit for the time that they have earned. And so this is for borrowers who have direct loans, those who have already consolidated into the direct loan program, and everyone who consolidates into the direct loan program by October 31st of this year, because that's when this waiver turns into a pumpkin. So you want to take the steps you need to take by October 31st, and we're going to talk more about that. So the biggest change under this waiver is that payments made prior to consolidation are now eligible. So I said briefly how, when you consolidated those Feller Perkins loans or even those direct loans, when you consolidated, you started at zero. Under the waiver, that's not the case. Under the waiver, you can get credit for the time prior to consolidation. So we're not looking at the loan program. You can have direct loan, Feller, Perkins, not looking at the repayment plan. We don't care. We're not looking at the loan type. There's an exception for Parent Plus because Parent Plus loans are always a little special. But we're not looking at any of that other stuff. We didn't do anything about employment requirements, and some borrowers have stuff they have to do now. Because if you still have Feller Perkins loans, you're going to have to consolidate into a direct loan to get for this waiver by October 31st. And if you've never submitted a PSLF form, you're going to have to do that by October 31st as well if you want to take advantage of this waiver. Because after that, the normal PSLF and TPSLF rules will apply. So here's just a chart that lays out kind of the major differences, right? Under normal rules, you can only get credit for direct loans. Under the waiver, you can get credit for time and repayment on direct, Feller, or Perkins. Under normal rules, you could only get credit if you made payments on the standard or IDR plan. Under the waiver, we don't care what plan you were on. Under normal rules, it had to be an on-time payment and a full payment. Under the waiver, it can count even if you made it late, it was less than the amount due, or even if you missed it, you could have technically been delinquent and it can still count. Under normal rules, you can only get forgiveness if you're working for a qualifying employer the time you apply for and receive forgiveness. Under the waiver, that's not the case. You can be retired. You can be working in the private sector. If you already have your 120, you can apply now and get your forgiveness. So you might fall into one of three borrower groups. You might only have direct loans. If that's the case, you just want to get a form in. You just need one form in by 1031. You'll have to certify your other employment later, but just to raise your hand by 1031, you need to get a form in, and you want to use our PSLF help tool to do that. We'll talk about that next. If you only have direct loans, you don't have to worry about consolidating. The only reason you would worry about consolidating if you only have direct loans is if you have some loans that are much older than the others. So if you went to undergrad, took time off, worked in public service, and then went to grad school, and now you have undergrad and grad loans, and the undergrad loans have 30 payments towards PSLF, and the grad loans only have 10. If you consolidate right now under the waiver, the entire consolidation loan gets at least those 30 months of credit, and you could potentially get the grad loans forgiven sooner. If you've already consolidated into the direct loan program, you want to submit forms for the time prior to consolidation. And if you still have Feller Perkins loans, you're going to have to consolidate if you're trying to get PSLF by 1031 and submit a PSLF form, because you have the most to do if you're trying to get this PSLF waiver. So quick note on Parent Plus loans in the waiver. We talked about Parent Plus loans. They're eligible for PSLF. To get on income-based repayment, you have to consolidate, and then you can get ICR, the least affordable of the plans. But while most consolidation loans under the waiver, they're going to get additional credit for the underlying loans. If you have a direct consolidation loan that only has a purely Parent Plus loan, that's it. That's the only thing underneath it. You're not going to get any additional credit for the time when it was a regular old purely Parent Plus loan. So no additional time there. Now, you could get additional credit for the time after consolidation. If you missed the payment or you were on the wrong repayment plan, you could get additional time there. And if you had a Parent Plus loan that you consolidated with your own student loans, so you have a direct consolidation loan with Parent Plus loans and student loans underneath, you could get additional time based on the student loan, just not based on the parent loan. We get a lot of questions from folks about how to determine your loan types. To do that, you want to go to studentaid.gov, log into your account, go to your aid summary. You'll be able to go through, scroll down, click through the loans, and basically, sorry, I'm going a little bit faster because I want to get to the other folks. And you'll get this PowerPoint, but you'll be able to click through the loans and you'll be able to see the full name of the loan, and it'll literally tell you in the title, direct or Fell or Perkins. And so you don't have to wonder what type of loan you have. And if you have loans that don't say direct, that's your cue that if you're trying to get PSLF, you're going to have to consolidate those into the direct loan program. So I do want to note a few things about consolidation, because we are encouraging so many folks to consolidate to take advantage of this PSLF waiver. And while we have taken a lot of the sting out of consolidation, there are definitely some considerations to have. So when you consolidate, you essentially have a new loan and your monthly payment could change. It could go down, but it could also go up. That's because if you no longer have a partial financial hardship, you could lose access to some of the IDR plans that are more affordable. If you have unpaid interest, your principal balance will increase. because it'll get capitalized. So if you have unpaid interest and fees, they'll get capitalized, your principal balance will go up. Your new consolidation loan will generally have a new interest rate. It's going to be based on a weighted average of the loans you consolidated. And you don't have to consolidate all of your federal student loans. You can pick and choose. When you log into the application, you'll get to check which ones you want to consolidate. That's particularly important right now because for PSLF, you need to consolidate non-direct loans by October 31st to take advantage of the waiver. But if you have consolidation loans that include commercially owned Fell or Perkins loans, so loans that are still owned by those private lenders, that loans that weren't on the payment pause, you could lose eligibility for one-time debt relief. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in a second, but just want to flag that, and you can learn more at studentaid.gov/debt relief. And keep in mind, once that consolidation goes through, that loan is dispersed, you can't undo it. So I do want to flag something called the IDR payment count adjustment, because we are doing so many great things on student loans. So many things are going to help so many borrowers. This is something that we announced in April, and we have not yet implemented. So you may be wondering why you haven't heard that much about it. But this is something while we are fixing issues with IDR payment counts, which IDR plans offer forgiveness after 20 or 25 years, depending on the type of plan, the type of loan you have. And so we are fixing something first called long-term forbearance steering, where we are giving borrowers credit if they were steered into long-term forbearances, which we define as 12 or more months consecutive, or 36 or more months cumulative. They can also get PSLF credit for that time if they certify their employment. We're also counting months spent in deferment prior to 2013, as long as it wasn't an in-school deferment. And we're counting economic hardship deferments after January 1st, 2013. Now we're going to do all this automatically later this year and next year, and more information on that is available and will be available on our website. But borrowers are still going to need to submit a PSLF form to certify all periods of qualifying employment for these places they want to get credit for. So let's briefly deferments, forbearance, and the PSLF waiver and what automatically counts. Those long-term forbearances we just talked about, 12 or more months consecutive, 36 or more months cumulative. Deferments prior to 2013, as long as it wasn't in school. Economic hardship deferments. Some military-related forbearances and deferments. So if you're on active duty status, even if your loans were in forbearance and deferment, you can get credit for that time. And while it's not automatic, you can get credit for some short-term forbearances by submitting a complaint to your servicer. So quick recap: to take advantage of the waiver, you want to confirm your employer is qualified. We're going to talk briefly about how to do that next. Consolidate non-direct loans if you need to, and submit a PSLF form, and do it by October 31st. Now there's still plenty of time to take advantage of this, but don't wait. Don't say, oh, I've got till October 31st. I'm going to do it October 29th. No, we encourage everyone to do it as soon as possible. Take advantage of this opportunity today. So when you're applying for PSLF, you're submitting a form that looks like this. You may have seen this previously, and so you can download this and fill it out, but we do encourage you, instead of downloading it, go to our help tool. Our help tool will enable you to generate this form, and that's the best thing to do, because if you use our help tool by October 31, you create a digital record, and we have a record of you. And even if you technically submit it to MOHELA, our PSLF servicer, after October 31, because you couldn't get the signature, or it has to go through our adjudication team because your employer's not in our system yet, as long as it's later approved, you'll be good under the waiver. So use our help tool by 1031. You can find it at studentaid.gov/PSLF. To use the help tool, you're going to need your FSA ID. If you don't have one, you need one. You need one for studentaid.gov. That's the best place to go to find information about your loans, do PSLF, sign up for IDR, consolidate your loans if you need to, and all of that stuff. So you're going to need that. You're also going to need something called an employer identification number, or EIN. You're going to need that for every single employer you want to certify. You can find it on your W-2 in box B. It's also on your pay stub, or you can ask your HR department for it directly. But you're going to need that, because that's how you search for employers in our help tool. That's how we find them. That's how you find them. So you're going to need that EIN to use our help tool. So go ahead and get that and have that ready when you get ready to log into the help tool. So the best place to go to information about PSLF and the waiver is studentaid.gov/PSLF waiver. To apply, you want to go to studentaid.gov/PSLF, and that's where you're going to generate that form. And once you have it, you're going to submit it to MOHELA by mail, fax, or upload if they're your servicer. And for general information, you can go to studentaid.gov/public service. All right, so that's PSLF, which I find to be very exciting, and I don't want it to get lost in the sauce. I want to make sure people know that you have until 1031 to take advantage of this limited waiver. It's not too late, but there is something also very, very exciting that is incredible, transformative as well. The Biden-Harris administration announced in August one-time debt relief of cancellation for low and middle income borrowers, up to $20,000 for borrowers who got a Pell Grant in college, up to $10,000 for borrowers who didn't get a Pell Grant. And it's for those who made less than $125,000 as a single person or less than $250,000 as a married couple. So that lays that out one more time. And it's based on your income of 2020 or 2021. It's based on your AGI. And it applies to most federal student loans, grad, undergrad, parent, consolidation, and defaulted loans, and some Fell and Perkins loans if they're owned by the Department of Education. So the way I like to think about it is, if you have loans that were on the payment pause, so you didn't have to make a payment, they weren't accruing interest, they're eligible for one-time debt relief. You just need to make sure that you meet the income requirements. And so you can prepare by logging to your studentaid.gov account, contacting your servicer, and making sure this slide is actually out of date, because over the weekend, we beta tested the application, and now it's officially available at studentaid.gov/debt relief/application. So it's a very timely webinar. The beta test allowed us to make sure that everything was good to go, and we had over 8 million people apply, it turns out. And so those applications are all going to be processed. Yours can be processed now. This application will be available for a year. You may have heard folks talking about it. It's a really easy application, a few short questions confirming your basic information. You don't even have to log into your studentaid.gov account like you have to do for other things, but you should still have a studentaid.gov account. Please get one if you don't have one. So you're just attesting, you're putting your basic information, attesting that you fall below the income threshold. You don't have to submit any additional documentation. You're going to get a confirmation email. If we do need something else from you for whatever reason later, we will reach out to you. But we're encouraging everyone to apply by mid-November so they can get their relief before the payment pause expires. But you have a year. You'll have until December 31st, 2023 to submit your application. So the application, studentaid.gov/debt-relief/application. For general debt relief information, studentaid.gov/debt relief. And then you can contact your loan servicer if you have additional questions. Here's some FSA contact info. I did that really fast. And now I'm going to turn it over to Scott, I think. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you so much, Ashley. And as I pull up my slide deck, I just want to take a moment and thank Reverend Sekinah and the UCC for having us today. We are very excited to be here and participate and interact with the community. So here's my side. Again, my name is Scott Filcher. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm from the Office of Students and Young Consumers at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And our office focuses on college affordability, loans and student loan repayment, and giving young consumers the tools that they need to avoid loan default or other serious negative financial events. So today I'll be covering kind of two different subjects. The first is what federal resources are available for college financing and paying for college. Our belief is that if you can reduce the amount you have to pay for college by knowing the value of college and the financing tools available, maybe you can take less out in student loans that you'll have to repay later. And the second is how to avoid student loan scams. Let me see, brief technical, there we go. First, let me start with a quick disclaimer required by our offices that this presentation is being made by a CFPB representative, aka me, on behalf of the Bureau. However, it does not constitute legal interpretation, guidance, or advice from the CFPB, and any opinions or statements made by myself are my own and may not represent the Bureau's views. So starting off with the federal resources that are available, and do note that, as Ashley said, we will be sending out these presentations, so don't feel that you have to write down all these very long website addresses. We will send it to you so you can just click on the links to make it a lot easier for you. I also am including my email address here, so if you have any questions on the information I'm presenting on today, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to have a one-on-one email or a phone conversation with you. And also here is our office's mailing list. So if you'd like more information about our publications, resources, or future presentations, please feel free to sign up there, and then we can get you that information as it becomes available. Now, this is the Paying for College website, which is our office's main website. And as you can see here, there's some good Paying for College resources that's available. This is a Consumer Financial Protection webpage. Here you can have information to understand financial aid offers that you get from colleges, so you can understand very forthrightly what type of money you'll be receiving that is free money that you won't have to repay, what money you might have to work for to earn, what money you'll have to repay, and then being able to compare those offers between different schools and colleges so you really do know who's giving you the best deal. We also have information here on how to repay your student loans and a lot of good information on that you should look at before you get to the point of repaying your student loans, so you know what the process will be before you get there. And then also some good information about just in general student banking and things that you can do to set yourself up for success after you graduate, rather than having some sort of black marks such as overdraft fees or other problems with any type of personal bank accounts. From there, you can also go to our grad path tool, also known as your financial path to graduation. This is an interactive tool that either you or your financial aid office could put information in there, such as the cost of your college, as well as your personal financial aid information. And it'll give you information such as how much more you have to come up for funding. There's also a good comparison that depending on what type of program you're going into at that particular institution, what your potential earnings will be, and how that will compare to an affordable financial aid and loan repayment plan after you graduate. The tool is really great because as you put it in, you can always stop at any point, and it'll give you a very unique HTML address that you can go back exactly where you started to be able to pick up where you left off and continue using the tool. And it's also great for financial aid offices because your schools can use it en masse, upload a bunch of files at once, and so you don't even have to do the work for most of it if you can get your financial aid office to participate as well. Here's another landing page that we have for student loan information. Provides guidance to college students by providing some of the basic information on student loans. And then as you can see here towards the bottom, you can pick your particular situation of what you might be when you're in repayment and get some direct advice for your particular situation. As you can see, you can have situations where you may have missed a payment or your payment's too high and you'd like to lower the amount you pay. Possibly it's gotten worse than that and your loan is in default or collection. So we give you some advice on how to fix that situation. Obviously right now with the great things the Department of Education is doing, no one is currently in default or collections, but if it should happen again after that point, that will give you some great information. And there's also the positive side where you're making all your payments, but you want to be able to maximize every dollar, maybe pay your student loans off early for whatever might not be ultimately forgiven through one of the Department of Education programs. So we give you some advice there. I also want to highlight a couple. This is a more generic tool of ours. I'm sorry. This is our Ask CFPB, and this goes beyond just the college financing aspect. You can put questions in here about anything related to consumer finance, and we'll have some sort of answers based on our other publications. It could be on things such as student loans, but it could also be about credit cards, auto loans, rental issues, or mortgages. So this kind of gives you a much broader aspect about everything that the CFPB does. And now I'd like to switch over and look at a couple of Department of Education great sites that we utilize in creating our tools, for instance. The first one here is the College Navigator, which is the Department of Education website that will allow you to compare schools or get a deep dive of information on one particular college or university. That information can relate to general tuition and costs or financial aid awards, enrollment and completion information, athletics information, campus security, particular academic offerings, as well as special information for service members. So this is a really great tool if you're starting that process to look for a college that you might want to enroll in. And coupled with that is the College Scorecard, which is another Department of Education website. And this provides a lot of great information on post-completion salary and median loan debt information based on the program of study at each institution. So you'll be able to compare whether you want to be a history major at one school versus another, or you can look at all of the programs at your particular institution to determine what the potential earnings would be afterwards and what the debt for those people that are majoring in those particular programs currently have. And then the final site I want to leave you with is a Department of Labor site, and it's Career One Stop. This is the largest federal repository of scholarship opportunities. Those opportunities may be federal-based, but they are also private scholarships listed here as well. And it contains more than 8,000 scholarships. And the great thing about this site is that it's organized by upcoming deadlines. So if you search for a particular interest or location or trait, you'll know which one you have to fill out first based on the upcoming deadlines because they'll be close to expiring at the top of the list. The scholarships here are also listed for high school students all the way through doctoral and professional degrees. So this is a site that anybody who's going to school could use to find more information. And then let's move to our second topic, which is how to avoid scams and how to identify them. You know, with all the changes in the student loan programs with PSLF and the recently announced broad-based loan cancellation program, you know, there's a noticeable increase in people trying to scam student loan borrowers and take advantage of them. So student loan scammers are adept to the general confusion that borrowers face when changes happen to their student loans. I can't think of a more fluid time than now for what's happening in the marketplace related to student loans since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic through our present day. Student loan scammers are definitely aware of these changes and the confusion in the general population for student borrowers, and they're prepared to try and hook you on a number of topics that are currently fluctuating. So some of the areas that we've seen that on is the CARES Act benefits, such as the payment suspension ending. Due to the multiple extensions of that payment, we've regularly seen scammers try to target borrowers with promises of extending the payment extension beyond what the Department of Education has announced the extension is available for. We've also seen scammers use a limited waiver program to promise immediate forgiveness to people, regardless of whether or not they might actually qualify for PSLF. And in general, anytime we see changes to loan policies or financial aid policies, scammers offer quick outs for confused borrowers. In general, anytime we see a change of presidential administration, we see scammers to take advantage of borrowers by claiming special access to loan forgiveness programs, whether they even exist or not. Recently, we've seen people talk about the Trump student loan forgiveness program, which was never even proposed as the administration changed to the Biden administration. And once the Biden administration started, we definitely saw the clicks for Biden student loan forgiveness long before he proposed the current $10,000 and $20,000 loan forgiveness. And this also, and especially now with the current proposal that's out there, that includes additional news coverage that scammers try to use to show that they can provide you with certain access levels that they might not be able to actually do in their targeting of borrowers. So beware if you hear people come to you to talk about that rather than you going directly to the Department of Education. And when there are changes to loan servicers, scammers increase their targeting of borrowers who might be affected by pretending to be their new loan servicer. And as we've seen over the last couple of years, a number of large loan servicers have left the loan servicing business, and this has caused a massive amount of loans being transferred to new servicers. This leaves borrowers with the possibility of being targeted as they wait to hear from their new loan servicer. And while we're on this topic, it should be noted that if you are switching loan servicers because of a previous loan servicer exiting, you're still completely eligible for all of those loan forgiveness programs that Ashley mentioned. The only one you might want to particularly note is that for the PSLF program, Mohila will be your loan servicer for all PSLF loans. So if you do submit an application where you haven't reached your 120 loan payments yet, just be on the look out for Mohila. But every other loan program definitely can be received regardless of who your loan servicer is. Now, I want to note that there are two types of ways that generally loan servicer scams will happen. And the first is a debt relief company. They'll claim to be able to reduce your overall debt or your monthly payments or provide you with complete loan forgiveness to the borrower, even though they have no ability to actually do so. If the debt relief company is a scam, they're also going to try to get your personal information, such as your bank account or some sort of online access information. And they also might try to charge you for a regular or one-time fee to reduce your debt and then not deliver on their promises. The second is a document preparation company, and they'll often make promises to handle all of your paperwork for your student loans, whether that's a consolidation application, PSLF forms, or repayment plan enrollment forms. These companies often do things that you can do on your own for free, or you can get free assistance to do so. What's to be on the lookout for here as well is that they're going to try to charge you fees as well as get information from you and then not deliver on filing your paperwork for you. Now, it's important to also note that specifically just by doing these services, that is not an illegal practice on its own. The practices become illegal if they misrepresent what they can do or if they don't deliver on the promises made to you. Even charging for these services that you can find for free or do on your own are not illegal if they don't misrepresent what they can do for you. Some of these companies, though, may also commit illegal activities, such as trying to identify and misrepresent who they're with. They might claim that they're with a federal, state, or tribal government agency. They might use similar logos or claim that they were approved by the agency or that they're working on behalf of the agency. They may also misrepresent what the outcome will be for you. They may promise you loan forgiveness when really all they can do is submit your paperwork for you. These activities do make some of their actions illegal, but you should be aware of your rights that you have, whether or not you're paying for legitimate services or whether you're being scammed. Now, some information specifically focused on how to avoid these types of loan scams. Make sure you do not share your personal information or financial information with solicitors or others, including your FSA ID or your password for your FSA ID, even if they're assisting you with filing any forms. If you are in a position where you've had to use your FSA ID or password with them, where they may have seen it, then you should immediately change your password after you finish working with that individual. In fact, you should regularly change all of your passwords on a regular basis to make sure that you can't be scammed or hacked. It's a good practice for all of your sites. Now, again, as I mentioned, some things to watch out for is that some scams will use similar logos, such as what the federal agency used, whether it's the Department of Education or the CFPB. They may also use similar web addresses or phone numbers as an agency or a service. For instance, they may try to get you to click on a hyperlink that says www.ed.com rather than the Department of Education's actual website, which is www.ed.gov. If you take your mouse and hover over that hyperlink, it will show you the actual link that it will take you to, and that could be a completely different website as well. And then watch out also for the deceptive language, as I mentioned, such as we are approved by the Department of Education. That the Department of Education, as well as CFB and other federal agencies, generally do not provide approvals to private companies. And also watch out for any type of high pressure sales language. They'll always try to pressure you quickly into making a snap decision to go with them and give them your information. So they'll use things like forgiveness is ending soon or first come, first serve in an attempt to pressure you into that. So watch out for that type of information. Now, some other ways that you can be aware that it's a scam. If you're asked for an initial or a monthly maintenance fees for service, that could be a scam. If you're asked to provide your FSA ID or password or a user ID and password if it's a loan servicer account, that could be a scam. If you're requested to provide credit card or debit card or bank account information, that could be a scam. And if you're advised that your servicer will not help you, or if you're advised not to contact or accept calls from your servicer, those are both big red flags that you're probably dealing with someone who's trying to scam you. And the Department of Education, along with some of those recent announcements, released some really good do's and don'ts. Some of the do's, as Ashley just mentioned, since they're now in a live application, are a little bit old information. So as she said, if you have not yet, create an FSA ID in studentaid.gov with a unique password that you don't use on all of your other websites. And make sure you change it regularly. That's a good way to do it. Make sure your loan servicer has your up-to-date information so they can contact you with information as your loan forgiveness program goes through. Report any scammers that you deal with to the FTC, and I'll have a link for you in the next couple slides. And then some of the don'ts, again, just to reiterate, don't pay anyone who's promised you debt relief. Don't give out your FSA IDs for other websites or passwords. Do not give your information, whether it's personal or financial, to someone who calls you out of the blue. If you're concerned about whether they're really with the organization, hang up and then call back to that organization from a published public phone number and continue the conversation with someone you know legitimately works for that organization. And then also don't refinance your loans with private lenders without knowing the risks, because you may lose out on certain benefits if you transfer your public government loan into a private loan. Now, if you've been the victim of a scammer or a hacker, what should you do? You should definitely change your FSA ID password and all your servicer passwords. And if you also use the same things for your credit card accounts, you should probably also change those as well. You should contact your loan holders and verify that they have the correct contact information on all of your accounts. You should revoke any third-party authorizations and power of attorneys that you may have unintentionally signed over to the scammer that you were working with. You should ensure that that company took no unwanted actions that you did not want. You should also notify your loan holders that you're a victim of a scam, as well as notify that on your credit report. You should also make sure that you cancel all automatic payments to that company by contacting your bank, and then report fraud to federal agencies as well as your state attorneys general so that they can launch independent investigations and also get the information out to individuals so that they are not also victims of the same types of scams. Now, if you're the victim of the fraud, we recommend, first of all, that you submit the complaint to the FTC, who's the federal representative on handling issues of fraud. But we also recommend that you can submit that complaint to the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau and to the studentaid.gov feedback center so that all of the departments related to student loans are aware of what's going on in the community. And then we can kind of work together to help prevent it in the future. And again, here's my contact information if you have any questions about this information as we move forward. And I now will turn it over to Kat.
Thanks so much, Scott. Hi, everyone. I'm going to introduce myself while I share my screen. Hi, I'm Kat Welbeck. I'm the Advocacy Director at the Student Borrower Protection Center. We're a national nonprofit, and we're solely focused on alleviating the burden of student debt. So you'll see my screen, or is it just a slide? This is okay, great. I'm just gonna go with it. But thanks so much, Sekinah, for the opportunity to present today. Really excited to be here. And then also to Ashley and Scott for all of that information. I'm just gonna follow along with some advocacy tips and just really thinking about the way that we stay engaged in this fight on student debt and student debt cancellation. And I really wanna start by echoing what we heard earlier when Ashley was really talking about really how historic and how meaningful President Biden's cancellation announcement is. I mean, one, it's really amazing to hear that 8 million people have already started the cancellation application, but also really thinking about for tens of millions of people how life-changing this is to see one, balances decrease, but also really thinking about the near 20 million people who should see their debts wiped out entirely. And I want to start by focusing on the positive and what we've been able to see with our collective action and advocacy and seeing what happens when we have a government and administration that's responsive to the people. But I also want to talk about also how we're seeing some people attack this win, really attack what we see as life-changing policy to really address the racial wealth gap, all for the sake of political gain. And so really quickly, I'm going to talk about some different challenges that we might see to debt cancellation, and one, how we can respond in coalition and really combat these political attacks on this amazing cancellation announcement, on all the amazing things we're hearing out of the Department of Education right now, but then also to how we can work collectively to make sure that as many people as possible are able to access the relief that they're entitled to. And so I'm not sure if people have heard about this. You know, we hear the exciting news about cancellation, but also last month, shortly after the cancellation announcement, we saw 6 Republican attorney generals, so including states, the states include Kansas, Missouri on behalf of Mohila, a student loan servicer, Nebraska, South Carolina, Arkansas, and the Solicitor General in Iowa, all bring what we consider a sham lawsuit to keep tens of millions of people out of access to this amazing debt cancellation program. And I think what we see in this lawsuit, again, is just another chapter in this really long history that we've seen with student loan companies like Mohila and their political allies trying to cheat people out of their debt, cheat people out of their rights to debt cancellation, or trying to keep people indebted for their own benefit, their own profit, and their own gain. And so I think one thing important thematically when we see that is just thinking about how some people, particularly in one party, are putting politics over the benefit of the people for the sake of their own gain. So what are the things that we could do collectively to make sure that, one, we're fighting back against these attacks, but two, getting people access to that cancellation. And so again, when we see that this is life-changing, I think one really important thing is to the power of uplifting people's narratives. I think, as faith leaders in the faith community, I think you all are interacting with people every day who are going to see the benefits of debt cancellation. And so one, what are ways that we can uplift people's stories? And so we know that while student loan servicers might want to tell one story about debt cancellation, we might see these AGs these attorney generals try to attack these this historic announcement. What are ways that we could also tell the story of real experiences of how people are affected by this cancellation announcement? Other things that we've seen also a variance in states of we've seen questions about how cancellation is going to be taxed. Fortunately, through 2025, there's no federal tax liability for canceled student loan debt. But what we've seen is whether it's taxed by state is going to be a state by state basis. And so while we see some states, again, trying to wield political power. So for example, some states saying that they plan to tax this, and again, as a way of political gain, versus other states like California, when we've heard people advocate saying, how can we have this amazing benefit from the federal government and our state, again, try to take money off the backs of people who are supposed to benefit from this relief? And what we saw is through collective action, people raising issues and raising awareness about this issue, the state, again, they're trying to figure out how to actually make this happen, but realizing this is a big win for the people. This is something that they want to make sure works well within administration, and at least announce that California, for instance, won't actually tax this cancellation. And I think one thing that we have to remember to do is to ground our advocacy in beating back these lawsuits, beating back again, or really calling attention to states that might try to take advantage of borrowers or use this as a political tactic and a tool in an election year, and really help people get debt cancellations they're entitled to. One other challenge that we see is that payments are set to resume really soon. I think one really important thing that Ashley touched on is that the department really encourages everyone to try to get their application for debt cancellation in by mid-November. That will give the Department of Education enough time to actually get the debt canceled before payments resume. But what we do know a lot about student loan borrowers trying to access 40 million people is that we know everyone may not get it in time. And so one thing we're also pushing on is we see amazing work that the administration is doing, like Ashley went through the public service loan forgiveness waiver, talking about cancellation, talking about fresh start and getting people out of default, all these amazing programs where we see the Biden administration committing to fixing the broken student loan system and taking those steps, but we still know there's more to be done. I know Sekinah mentioned earlier and say, we are excited about the cancellation announcement, but we asked for 50K, or we want to make sure that people, I know as an advocacy organization, we're calling on the administration to make sure people's debts are actually canceled before we resume repayment. So one thing we're going to push in the coming months is also pushing an extension of when payments are set to resume, because we want to make sure that everyone that is entitled to full and complete debt relief, whether it's via public service loan forgiveness, whether it's via cancellation, has the opportunity to get that debt canceled before they get their first bill. And so that is something that we're looking towards in coalition, and making sure that we can make sure that these programs are working, these programs are implemented, we're seeing these benefits to borrowers before we turn the system back on. Because like Ashley said, we're seeing amazing results, whether it's 200,000 people who've gotten full cancellation through PSLF, or another million people who are closer to it. But how can we also advocate and make sure that we're pushing for the administration to make sure that we're continuing to keep people out of repayment until we can really fulfill these full promises of these programs that we see are working, but just need more time for implementation so they can reach everyone they're intended to. And I apologize for going quickly. I know we're close to time, and hoping we still have time for questions. So really quickly, things that you can do to help. And I think, again, so in addition to thinking about ways that to push back against political attacks on cancellation and really elevating the stories of how this is going to benefit so many millions of people, is also the other side of that, getting the access to cancellation to those many millions of people. So again, earlier Ashley went to the PSLF waiver. We know that the cancellation application is now out. So what are ways that you all can make sure in community that you're sharing these resources with student loan borrowers, or like we're right now on this webinar, hosting events, roundtables, town halls, one, getting education about these different initiatives, these different programs, this access to relief, but then also sharing that more broadly in the community so more people know about these changes, know that the application is live, know that they have 2 weeks to complete the PSLF waiver. So really just making sure that people are hearing from trusted partners in their community about these options that are available to them. Again, again, I'm just going to repeat it again because it's so important. Again, people have 2 weeks for the PSLF waiver, so also raising awareness there. And I think also Scott did a wonderful job about talking about beware of scams, because as much as we're celebrating this access to relief, we know that many people are trying to take advantage of borrowers and capitalize on this opportunity where people are, trying to just understand so many different issues, all of this information at once, really trying to process these changes to the student loan system. And we've seen historically, this is when people capitalize on that. So also really being able to share a lot of the information that Scott just talked about and helping people be aware about scams. And then also really quickly, again, like Ashley said, this one also might be out of date because again, the cancellation application is live, but in terms of helping people prepare, and I think one thing that also helps people avoid scams is telling people where to access important resources and go to the right place. Being able to know that studentaid.gov, the federal student aid website, is going to be a really key resource for so many borrowers, but we know that people are not going to be able to access that if they don't have the information. So really being able to share where people can access critical information about where to get information about cancellation, information about the PSLF waiver in these last 2 weeks that are winding down. And so again, on this slide, a little bit of information to help borrowers prepare, knowing, did they get a Pell Grant so they know how much debt cancellation they're eligible, making sure that their information is up to date. So as we approach return to repayment, they're getting the information they need from their servicers, knowing what type of loans they have, as Ashley was talking about, that can affect the different types of relief that they're eligible or the different steps they need to take to access this relief, but really helping borrowers prepare and being able to pinpoint those key issues that people need to be aware of to be able to access all of these programs. And then just really quickly, again, a little bit out of date, helping borrowers apply. The application is live. So really, a lot of this is going to be pushing people to make sure that they access this cancellation announcement. Again, hopefully before mid-November, like Ashley said, before payments resume, but making sure people know before, hopefully, again, before, so their debts can be canceled before January 1st of 2023, but also letting people know that they have through 2023 to apply, get the debt relief that they're entitled to. And just really quickly, I won't go through this because I know we're a little bit over time and I think there's still some questions, but just letting people know that here's access to additional resources, both a lot at studentaid.gov, but also some resources that we have at the Student Borrower Protection Center to walk people through the public service loan forgiveness process, to walk people through questions they might have about cancellation. And also just going to put a little pin in there too. We're hosting regular webinars and events to help people learn more about this public service loan forgiveness waiver as we wind down, but also as we gear up to help people access the cancellation announcement. We'll also have webinars to walk and guide people through those. And so I'll be sure to share those with Sekinah, and then also the dates of those webinars will be on this resource page. But I will stop there because I think we're over time, and I'll hand it back over to Sekinah because I think it might be time for Q&A.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you all. I do have some more questions that came in from people, and I want to at least be able to have those read out and answered online so that they can make sure they know. And I do know that some of these, okay, great. And we have panelists that have to leave, so I'm going to consolidate them. There have been questions coming from current college students, as well as a question coming from a parent. If we have parent loans for more than one child, do we qualify for the $10,000 for each child or just once as parents? And also a question from a parent about does the income, is the income on the college student or is the income on the parent? Ashley, if you can answer those quickly before you have to leave.
Great question. So remember, it's on a per borrower basis. So there are going to be lots of borrowers, parent borrowers, student borrowers who have multiple loans. I personally have 9 separate loans because, right, you're going to do, lots of people are going to have multiple loans if you never consolidate them. So it's on a per borrower basis, and we have like a hierarchy of how we apply them to your loans in the way that makes the most sense for you and is most beneficial. But it's up to 10,000 or up to 20,000 per borrower, not per loan. So that's the first piece. The second piece is if it's a dependent student, it is based on their parents' income. And so if they're still in school, they did a 2020 or 2021 FAFSA, hopefully we'll have the information on file for them and they wouldn't have to do anything else. But yes, it would be based on their parents' income if they are a dependent student still.
Thank you all so much. Those that have already registered for the webinar, those questions that we did not get a chance to answer, we will send those to you because we have your email addresses. We'll make sure our panelists answer those questions and we'll send those to you in our follow-up email. Some of our panelists have to go. Ashley, one of our key panelists, she has to jump off. And so we are very thankful for all of you that have been with us today. We're thankful for this debt cancellation. We're thankful for the actualization of the whole value of biblical debt jubilee, that God says that we should not be in cycles of debt. We should not be burdened with debt for the rest of our lives. But we also know that this debt cancellation is one time, and ultimately we need to change workforce education. We need to change higher education as well as higher education servicing so that all will have access to better jobs, better employment, and also have access to that without the burden of excessive debt. Thank you all so much. God bless you and have a wonderful evening.